Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. Today, we are joined by Brian Talbot, who is the CEO of the Value CMO. He has been in the business for quite a while now, and I'm very excited to hear more about his insights into the world of being a fractional CMO, as well as his expertise in marketing, since it is very deep and very wide. Welcome, Brian. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate being here.
So I was wondering, really, how did you find yourself in the world of being a fractional CMO? It's a pretty specific and somewhat narrow. Like, there's not a whole lot of you running around out there. How did you
Yeah,
find
there's a
yourself here?
lot more now than when I first started, I'll tell you that. I had been head of marketing for a number of different organizations, B2B, B2C, and even did agency work as a VP at an international agency. And in about 2016, I decided that I had spent way too many hours in meetings I didn't belong in, playing corporate politics and doing all the stuff that we tolerate for the paycheck. And I decided that I was no longer going to tolerate it. So I decided to go out on my own and become a fractional CMO. My initial plan was to start a company, hire a bunch of people like me who had the same attitudes and opinions, but really getting paid for our highest value work as opposed to getting paid full time to go into the office, plan lunch, have your hallway chat, and all that other stuff. That's great for culture, but the reality is that at this stage in my career, the highest value work I could do was around strategy and storytelling in the marketing world for companies, organizations. And so I went out on my own back in 2016, and at the time I had to explain what a fractional CMO was.
We still have the same trouble here in the fractional CFO world. People are like, wait, what do you do again?
Are you
So
kidding me? That was my easy out. Because I would say,
really,
yeah, I'd say, you've heard of a fractional CFO, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, just apply that to marketing. It's not that different. It's you get the best of my work for a fraction of the cost. But
right.
you also get a fraction of my time. So that's the trade-off for that. So yeah, I always use the fractional CFO thing as my easy out because people at least understood what that was at that time. So
Story. That's really interesting. In the accounting world, we often find ourselves trying to make the leap from like advisor to fractional CFO.
sure,
Um,
sure.
so it really depends also on like the corporate size. So if you have people who are normal people who started their plumbing operation, as a one-man shop, and then and it's like now they have a $5 million a year business. They don't know
Exactly.
corporate. They don't know this stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's often what we find, or where I find like, oh, how do I talk about what we actually do as a fractional? So
Yeah. Well, it's an
so did
incredibly
you?
valuable service. It's for all those. I found my sweet spot is really working with those companies between 2 and 20 million because they're big
Ooh, yeah,
enough to have grown beyond just being that one man shop, right? And they need help, but they don't have the ability to go ahead and hire a full-time CMO or CFO or anybody in the
right,
C-suite.
absolutely.
And so they can get that experience at a price they can afford. And that really is where we fill a great niche for SMBs all around the country.
Right. So did you find yourself as you were jumping into this world really marketing or attacking on the strategic advantage that you provide, or more the nuts and bolts, this is how we like do sales?
No, actually, it was very much the strategic side, right? There are plenty of freelancers out there. We're living in a gig economy. I just saw a stat that 50% of all millennials are freelancers or will be within the next year. And
Sure.
with that said, that's great for certain skills that you may need or certain activities or tasks that you need completed. The differentiation between a fractional CXO, right? We'll talk about CXO being the CFO, CEO, CMO, whatever that specialty is the ability to bring that strategic leadership, accountability, and expertise. And that's really the biggest differentiation. Now, I'll run across people who say, well, I'll just hire you and you'll be my one-man marketing machine. And I look at them and say, well, that's probably not the best fit for me. And I will certainly be the most expensive graphic designer you will ever hire at that. So, why don't we talk about strategy and storytelling, team leadership, team management? Vendor management is a really big thing, especially in the marketing world, because you have digital media companies, you have production and creative companies, you have a whole slew of people who make a living off of freelancing, whether it's copywriting, graphic design, or whatever it is, web design, all that stuff. Most business owners don't know how to talk that language very well. They understand what they need, but they don't speak the language, and they certainly don't know how to give the correct creative direction for a lot of that stuff. So
Right.
it ends up being that, well, I'll know it when I see it. So can you just change it? Well, that doesn't help the people that are doing the work for you. As a fractional CMO, I can come in and give very specific directions and directions that are influenced by experience and data and those kinds of things, as opposed to just always running off my gut.
Right. And similarly, we have, it's like, I know it's right when I see it, so change it. Um, is something we encounter where it's like most of my job is like not sharing the spreadsheets with people. They don't want to see the spreadsheets. They really don't care. They don't know how to read them, or they don't want to spend the time. And
Just
and
tell me, am I
so
good? Am I bad? Do I owe taxes or do I have a profit? That's all I want to know.
yeah, no, really. And so it really does come down to it's like, okay, your operating costs specifically are 5% too high. I recommend we drill down here. And being that specific is really the language that most business owners speak. Rather than saying, look, here is our forecast. What are your questions?
Sure, because that's the value you're bringing. You're truly a business advisor. You're truly helping them as part of their company to grow. What no, regardless of the role that you're playing, the C-level role that you're playing on a fractional basis, right? I take a look as a fractional CMO, and I look at revenue, I look at marketing, and I look at operations, because the reality is every small business wants to grow their revenue. To do
Right.
that, they're going to have to improve their marketing and engagement to get more customers or find those market niches or whatever the plan is. If you do those things to substantially grow your company, it's going to affect your operations. So you better at least be aware of, hiring triggers, organizational structures, standard operating procedures, those kinds of things as well, because that all flows into it. And it's funny, I've had people go, well, that's a lot more than just marketing. Yeah, it is. And that's really what a fractional CXO should be doing, is helping you reach your business goals.
Right, absolutely. Where when recently I've had a whole slate of people who are like, Brian, I'm thinking about fractional CFO type work. What is this even like? And I'm like, what? Maybe 40% of your job is actually doing accounting and numbers. And the other 60% is organizational type stuff or networking. Because when a client comes to you and says, hey, we're doing another round of funding, who do we go to?
Right.
Like it's a gold star, if you will, if I can make the connection, say, oh, you need funding, this is who you talk to. Oh, you need a new HR person, this is where you go. And being able to make those connections.
Yeah, the networking, opening up to the opportunity of networks, is always super helpful, right? Someone in the marketing world, or a business owner trying to find someone in the marketing world, they don't know the difference between a $15 graphic artist and a $150 graphic artist, right? And they just kind of look at it, and usually they'll end up making those decisions based more on financial than what the actual outcomes or outputs are. And that can be a penny wise pound foolish kind of move. And in some instances, it actually works, but you have to be able to recognize the difference as you go. So the CXO world is really about being a business advisor, and I think that that's
Absolutely, yeah.
an important distinction for anyone that is thinking about moving into the CXO world or thinking about hiring a CXO.
Sure. So I'm curious, within the world of finance, it's like so long as your company uses money, I can probably make some commentary about what's going on.
Yeah.
Pretty wide. Within marketing, do you find that you care particularly not about the industry type? Are you really industry agnostic? What do you generally find?
That's so interesting because when people go to look for a fractional chief marketing officer, they always get the advice, find someone in your industry or who has had success in your industry. I'm going to tell you, I've been doing marketing for a very long time. If you're good at marketing, you're good at marketing. If you know the fundamentals, you know the fundamentals, right? They do cross over. There are differences, right? There are differences in approach and differences in your strategy for, especially in the world of B2B versus B2C. But a good marketer should be able to bring all the fundamentals and the frameworks to be able to do a very effective marketing, regardless of the company, regardless of the industry.
Do you ever find that you struggle to connect with the mission or the services of your clients? Is that something that you have to work for, or or is getting excited or catching the vision something that comes pretty easily for you?
Yeah, it's not hard for me, but I've been doing this for a long time. And previously, I've worked in 7 or 8 or 10 different industries. So
Right.
kind of having that ability to float through really does help a lot, right? The first thing I do when I'm considering taking on a client is I'll do the research and sink my own time into finding out about not only that company, but the industry, and then determine, does this make sense? Is this a good fit? Um, Really the fit, the culture and the people are also one of the most important aspects from my perspective of being a fractional CXO, right? I'm not your employee, but I am your teammate, right? We
Right.
have the same goal to help you become incredibly, wildly, beyond words successful. But I don't expect you to tell me when and where I need to be at what time of the day, right? We're not
Absolutely.
looking
Absolutely.
for hours, we're looking for outcomes. And so as long as we're on the same page and as long as we're agreed to that, right, we can function very, very well together. And for anybody else who says, yeah, I just want you to do stuff for me, that is not the right connection at all. So you gotta feel that out a little bit in advance, but once you do, it's um it's pretty easy to really help and influence companies regardless of where they start.
Where, in your perspective, in along those lines, is the difference between someone who says does your advertising versus fractional CMO type role? Because there seems to be a real distinction there.
Yeah, yeah, there definitely is. A fractional CMO, actually any kind of fractional CXO, would be a role that you would have on your executive team if money were not played in the equation, right?
Sure.
So it's funny because you'll have people go, "Well, I'm a fractional digital marketing officer."
Spur.
And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
that's interesting because I've never heard of an organization that's had a chief digital marketing officer, right? That's a role that rolls up into a chief marketing officer. So, as that goes, it's A fractional CMO should be someone who's a trusted advisor, who's a part of your executive team, right? Who has the ability to help you make business informed business decisions for your organization, should even be able to lead other people on your team, right? If you're just looking for something specific, that's probably more the role of a consultant than a fractional CMO or CXO, whatever, fill in the blank. And that's kind of the biggest difference, right? And then if you really want to just focus on, hey, I need help with Google ads, that's a freelancer or
Sure.
a service-based business that does that. And so
Right.
those are kind of the roles, right? There's freelancer, which is an independent person that is great at doing a specific task. There's a service provider that's a company that does a single task or a series of tasks all in the same grouping. There's a consultant who usually comes in and focuses on is more singularly focused on a problem or an issue. And then there's the fractional CXO who comes in and really becomes part of your company leadership and everything that that entails.
When I was checking out your website, you wrote an article a while back on culture versus strategy
Yeah.
and kind of the interplay between that. And you mentioned it briefly. I was wondering if you might actually kind of open up that can of worms a little bit and talk about like what is culture versus strategy. What's the role play or the interplay between the two? Where do you focus?
Yeah, so everyone says, the famous saying is culture eats strategy for lunch. Um, Not necessarily,
Okay.
right? You can have a great culture, and this was really apparent in the late 2000s and the 2010s when all these hip new companies got these awesome office spaces and there was a foosball table and a pool table and there were beer taps and there was they brought in lunch 3 times a week and they did all these things and they had these amazing cultures. The problem is there's nothing behind it. There's no strategy to make that company successful. I was talking to a guy one time who was hired as the vice president of sales for a startup, and this was in Austin, Texas, right? And they didn't even have an MVP, a minimally viable product, and they were a software
Right.
company. And they were 12 or 18 months away from having an MVP, but yet they had a vice president of sales. And what was he supposed to sell? So that's a situation where culture, they had a great culture. They had no strategy. They had no strategy that they could actually execute on. So I think it's definitely a balance, right? You also don't want the opposite where you have that strategy that's so locked down and buttoned up that investors everywhere are happy to put money into it, but the whole place is like working in a gulag, right? If you have to spend your time at work in misery, it's just not worth it. Life's way too short.
Yeah, that goodness. I'm having flashbacks to one of my corporate roles. It was with the defense contractor, so government, which operates
Oh,
outside of normal framework,
oh,
and massive contracts, tons of money flowing through that place.
sure.
But the culture was awful. It
Hmm.
was the worst, and it
Yep.
eventually it was the thing that one of the things that made me leave because like I can't keep doing this. I have to, it helped shove me into the world I am now.
Well, there you go. And that's not the first time I've heard a story like that, right? And my own story isn't that far off from that. When you find yourself spending more time doing office politics and you know shifting cubes or shifting offices as a matter of your self-worth, you got to really think about is this worth it? There's a lot of things you can do. You can go make donuts. That's a fun thing, right? You you can do just about anything you want to make money. And after a certain point, when you've had enough experience, you have something really valuable to offer back. And that was kind of the decision point for me to become a fractional CXO or a fractional CMO in my case, was I knew that what I did was very good and very effective. And I knew that I could do it across a wide variety of companies. And so based on those things, that was the decision is I don't like the culture of the last two or three companies I've been at. So, maybe it is me. Well, if it is, let me go start a company. And then if I don't like the culture, I have only one person to complain to. So
Cool.
that's how we got here, right? So culture, strategy, it's not an either or, it's a yes and in my view.
Sure. I'm really interested also in your perspective on the B2B to the B2C side of things, which when I teach clients normally in their nascent phases,
Mhm.
they have one strategy. They are selling widgets. They are doing work. And they have this one thing that they do, and they do it really well. And then there comes a critical point, normally in the low millions, where all of a sudden that strategy is not quite as effective. It's not working out quite as well. They need to expand their services. They need to pivot. And one of those critical decisions that people do need to make is can we consumerize our business product, or can create a business deliverable from our consumer products? Um, like, that's my interfacing. I'm not, I don't do marketing. I look at marketing statistics. um, but so, what do you see are the real differences between those two marketplaces? How do you handle those?
It's interesting. I would tell you that B2B is, B2C is a little more complex, right? Because you usually have a marketplace of a much larger number in your market. B2B is usually a little more finite, and it's a little bit more specific. So you're always selling benefits, right? But on the B2C side, it's easier to see those benefits when you highlight some of the features and then what do those features deliver to the end user or the customer. On the B2B side, your customer isn't always the end user, right? And so sometimes you have to sell to your customer who then has their concerns about the end users. And so there's an extra layer in there. They're different and they require different approaches, but ultimately they still need the fundamentals of marketing, right? Which in my world, I consider that understanding your market, creating a message that resonates with your target audience or your market, and then having a map, which is a strategic roadmap that helps you make those connections and create engagement with your company, with your brand, with your product, and then make that engagement worthwhile enough to be able to help promote revenue exchange.
Right,
So
right,
it's
sure.
about the market, the message, and the map, and that's on the B2C side or the B2B side, it's still pretty much the same. There are differences, mostly around your the size of your audiences.
Sure. Is that the primary consideration? Or if you have someone who says, "Hey, we sell this great widget to consumers, but we think we can make a really great business case for it." What does that process look like? How do you start kind of working through those questions and seeing if it actually is viable?
Again, it's a market analysis, right? It all starts with um, understanding your market, understanding what really motivates them. What problem are you trying to solve? If you can answer the question as to what problem you're trying to solve, that's the starting point for it all, right?
Hmm.
It's the old what's the job to be done, right? And there was an interesting study from Harvard a long time ago, and they realized that people would go to McDonald's and they would buy coffee in the morning. That was the most popular thing. They would buy sodas, but they would also buy milkshakes. And the number of people who bought milkshakes was considerably higher through the drive-through, and they were trying to figure out why. And so what they ended up coming up with is there was a job to be done, and that job to be done was keep yourself busy during your commute, during the ride to work. And they
Hmm.
realized that a milkshake took a lot longer to consume than a soda. And so
Interesting.
once they figured out the job to be done, then they had a lot more opportunities to adjust the size of the product or figure out how to market that for a morning crowd or a commuter crowd. So you have to start with understanding, what is the issue or the problem that's trying to be solved and how can your product solve for it? And once you do those things, then you can find all sorts of alternative markets that you didn't necessarily think of, right?
Hmm.
So that's how you can branch from B2C, starting at B2C and then moving into B2B, or vice versa, right? If you have a great B2B product and you're selling to distributors and stuff like that, you can sell direct, which is always an option. So that's kind of
Yeah.
the way all that stuff works. But it starts with the market, and then you adjust your messages to resonate with that market, and then you have your roadmap, right? So the message, the message, and the map.
Right, which
In
is
my world, it's very simple. People go, "Oh, it's so confusing. There's so much to it." I'm like, "No, it's in my world. It's really simple. It's the market, the message, and the map, and I can
well,
I can fit that into just about anything." So
sure. No, that's awesome. We need people like you. Marketing is something that goes over my head. Like, there's a reason I'm in finance, not in marketing, not in sales.
well, and there's a reason
Um,
I'm in marketing and not in finance. So thankfully, there are people like you.
because so telling the story about the McDonald's milkshake reminds me of a kind of a similar but different strategy that was employed by Starbucks. Um, in that, but this is purely on the financial side, which is that there came a point somewhere in the 2000s that Starbucks realized that they're really a bank, not a coffee shop. Because they have like those prepaid accounts or whatever, and you can load up your Starbucks card or whatever
Sure,
with like 20
absolutely.
bucks. And you have a billion customers that give you, 20 bucks, and some of it, sometimes it gets used, a lot of it doesn't. So what do you do with this $20 billion that you're working with? You invest it. You play the
Gift
markets.
cards and subscriptions are truly some of the best ways to improve your profitability for exactly the reasons you just talked about. It's cash up front, right?
Mhm.
It's a commitment that the customer is going to come back and to your place, and a lot of times it goes unused, but it's already been paid for. So,
Right. Especially with gift cards, there's which is the one I encounter most frequently.
yeah.
In that it sits there in your account, and there comes like it's been 18 months. The chances of anyone using this very low, very
Yeah,
low.
I forget what the number is on the redemption rate of gift cards, but it's
Yeah.
probably somewhere close to the same number of people who stop using a service but never cancel the subscription, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, that's another one that we have, which is one of the big reasons why there was a push to subscriptions, because it's automatic income and often it's a very low burden on your services because people
Yep.
forget.
Yep.
It's just there. So yeah, with Starbucks, there was a whole regulatory hullabaloo because they realized that more of their income was coming from, or more of their profit was coming from financial instruments than it was from selling coffee.
Oh my. Oh
And,
my.
JP Morgan and Wells Fargo have a problem with that because they're regulated and Starbucks isn't. So
Uh-huh.
it was a whole drama in the finance world, but very fun to watch play out.
Well, and then the flip side to the whole Starbucks thing is they don't sell coffee. They sell a lifestyle, right?
Absolutely.
They sell a lifestyle, which is what made them popular, right? They created these stores that looked like your living room, and there was a fireplace, and it was a great place to just get away for 20 minutes.
Right.
And so that is the idea that they were selling. They weren't selling coffee. I mean, they
Right.
were, but they weren't, right? They were selling that whole lifestyle. And that's how they really built it out.
Hmm.
And to a small degree, they were also selling status.
Right.
Because if you walk around with a Starbucks cup, right, then people know. It's the same
Absolutely.
concept that went into the beer wars and the rise of import beers and craft beers. And Heineken
Oh,
figured this out back in the 70s. They realized that most beers came in brown bottles and they had a green bottle. And so if you went in and you had that green Heineken bottle that you paid an extra dollar or $2 for, whatever it was, right? That was a status symbol. And for the next 20 minutes or however long it took you to drink that beer, you could feel just a little bit better about yourself. And so that's again going back to the whole job to be done. That's what
right.
Starbucks is. You want coffee? Go make coffee at home and you know, take it with you in a to-go cup. That's the most
Yeah.
economical way to do it. If you really want coffee, go get a coffee at McDonald's. But why is there a line out the door and all the way around the block for Starbucks? It's a lifestyle and it's a status.
Same with, was it the iPhone? It's the same sort of thing.
Oh
It's,
yeah.
you have the iPhone. It's Android is infinitely more customizable. You have so many more options, but
Yeah,
it's an iPhone. It's
it's
Apple.
an iPhone.
You
That's
get the blue, you
exactly
get the blue chat bubbles.
and that is what that is a big problem for a lot of people and why they won't switch to Android-based technologies.
Right. Right. Which is also why unironically spoofing what was it? Apple Chat is a big thing on the like third party markets so that you too can get the blue bubbles when you text
Right,
iPhone users.
right.
So, which that kind of makes me reflect even on, the role that we play in the CXO world. Where it's like there's the job to be done. But what
Right.
most of my clients are really asking for is security. Mostly they want someone who's going to come along and say, it's going to be okay. And if it's not okay, to say it's not okay, but here's what we're going to do about it.
Right. It's the expertise. And that's one of the things they're hiring is the experience and the expertise, right? The been there, done that, and continue to do that for other people with a successful track record, right? It's also much easier to buy a fractional CXO than it is to buy a C-level executive.
Absolutely.
There's so much less risk, right? You can try them out. You can date before marrying, if you want to call it
Yep.
that, right? There's so much more opportunity and advantage. I saw someone posted just yesterday on LinkedIn and said by 2030, the majority of companies will have fractional executives and outsourced workforces because it
Mm,
just makes more sense.
right. There comes a real point when having, like, say, on the finance side, having someone who's like, this is how you do forecast, this is how you do KPIs, and this is how we apply strategic thinking to accounting
Hmm.
is really useful, but you
Oh,
don't want to be paying them $500,000 a year.
right. Right. And the bookkeeping, the tasks, right? That's fine, but that's getting easier and easier to start to outsource.
Right.
So if you're outsourcing the task-oriented work, and it's the same thing in marketing, right? You need social media posts. Okay, that's like easy to find people to do at a very inexpensive rate.
Right.
And so you do that, or blog writing or even making videos or putting together a podcast, right? Where all you have to do is show up like this and I talk. And then next thing I
Right.
know, it's done. That's great. So all those things are easy enough to find, but you still need someone who can organize and manage and bring value and coordinate it all, right? And that's where you have two choices. You can hire someone as a full-time resource at a very expensive salary, usually fully loaded, benefits and everything else, or you can bring in a fractional CXO to fill that to fill that role. They come with fresh eyes, new ideas. a different perspective. Because they're active in the market, they usually stay up on trends better than someone who's a full-time employee and is more absorbed inside the company, right? And so there's so many advantages to bringing in a fractional CXO. And I see why people are predicting that in the future we'll have a lot of fractional CXOs and a lot of gig workers and very few full-time employees unless it comes down to the IP and development of your core products. And you know what? That's always been the way. If it's core to your business, hire it. If it's not core, but it's supplemental, outsource it.
I find it, and this is something that we've certainly seen in accounting over, especially the last, it seems 2 years, really since the pandemic has kind of come to a close, the explosion of what outsourced accounting firms, fractional CFO firms are actually offering. Um, and which is what you were just mentioning, and we'll see if that trend continues. Uh, and I'm want to hear more about the Value CMO, and I've actually found the name kind of intriguing. Many fractionals don't put value in their name. Uh,
Yeah.
for fear of saying that, oh, we're cheap or whatever. They don't want to shortchange themselves, which is certainly not a position that you would find yourself in.
Yeah.
So can you tell us, like, what about the name? Tell us, is that kind of the driving ethos for your business? Tell us more about that.
Well, it is. It is because when I started it, I wanted to not only do the highest value work, right? The strategy and the storytelling, the brand development and the strategic planning, but I also wanted to offer it at a value that could really make a difference for a small or mid-sized business. And so my core target market is between are companies between 2 and $20 million. I struggle with startup companies because oftentimes there's just not enough there. But by the time you reach $2 million, you've done a lot. You've done a lot to accomplish that level, right? Now, the other thing I found was most people who get to that 2 million or more have done it mostly through heroics, right? Friends, family, connections, robbing Peter to pay Paul, everything you can do. And eventually, when you get to a certain level, you run out of heroics. And so now what do you do? Well,
Mhm.
those are the people that I can help the most. So those are the people I come in and I'm able to sit down and share with them and facilitate all the fundamentals. So we understand the market, the message, the map. We put a plan in place. We put brand messaging in place that is more than just, hey, we had somebody who said this and it sounded really cool, so that's what we use, right?
Right.
Maybe it is a good thing to use. Maybe it isn't. We have to dig in and explore all that stuff. And there's processes around that. And I think the processes give people a lot of comfort, right? It's not just some guy who's been doing this for a very long time comes in and says, this is what we have to do. It's like hiring that interior decorator for your house who doesn't understand you or your style. And by the time they're gone, they got rid of all your good stuff, stuck you with a giant bill for all the stuff that doesn't make any sense. And you're like, they never even asked me. Right. So
Right.
everything we do at the Value CMO is facilitated, it's interactive, it's collaborative. And we do it at a rate that is that shows that value, right? And so the nice part about that, it's a fraction of my time, but it's a fraction of the cost it would be to hire me. And there's a lot of value in that because I bring many decades of experience with me that a lot of people just simply couldn't afford or didn't want to use their funds in that fashion. And that's fair, right?
Right.
So if I can do that for a bunch of different companies and I can truly make a difference, I feel much better about my day. I really enjoy. I have one company that I'm working with that I've been working with for about 2.5 years now. and they were just acquired.
Oh,
That
wow.
to me is the biggest compliment and the biggest
Such a
success,
win.
right? Now, yeah, I just worked myself out of a job, but that's okay because it wasn't about me. It was about helping this company get to their goals. And so they've just been acquired. So they're going through the transition. So we'll spend a little more time together. We'll make sure
Yeah,
everything's smooth and easy. And man, I can't imagine a bigger way to make a difference than helping a business owner who put everything on the line to risk it and to start the business to get that payout, to get that exit, to be able
absolutely.
to enjoy whatever it is that they want to do with the rest of their lives. So
Yeah,
those are the kinds of things I look for. And fortunately, at the Value CMO, I've been able to help companies double or triple their revenue within 24 to 36 months. It's a pretty good return on investment. So that in
that's
itself is more
at
than
least decent. Yeah, no, that's great.
right. And you're talking $2 to $20 million companies. So if you
Yeah,
double or triple your revenue at that level, you know, it's something that small business owners would struggle like hell to try and do on their own. And I make it very affordable. You know, you can hire an entry level or slightly past entry level marketing person, or you can hire me and I can help run it and bring in all my experience, all my expertise, my accountability to your company, and my leadership abilities. And that's one of the fun things I get to do. If you already have anybody on your company who is dedicated towards marketing, I get to
right.
coach and mentor and train them. And honestly,
Mm,
that's one of the most fun parts of the job is to take people who, maybe are really good at putting an event together and teaching them so much more about marketing and how to become a more strategic thinker, right? So that it's not just about, well, I put an event together. Well, what was the return on investment? What did we get for that? What are the key performance indicators that we're going to measure going into this so that we can actually determine, was this a good use of marketing funds and should we do this again next year? Right? And that's
that
where
is
it I love that
no,
part.
that is, and goodness, I have sat in on so many meetings where no one has ever asked the question, how do we measure the success of this marketing push we're doing? No idea. They
If you
kind of,
can't measure the success, you really need to think about why you're doing it. I have a client that we were running through and we were trying to find out they added a whole bunch of money to their marketing budget and hired a bunch of companies and brought me in to manage it all. And after a 90-day evaluation, we started making adjustments.
yeah,
And I said at that point in time, I said directly to the owner, I said, look, I'm recommending that we make these adjustments, but I will also tell you the minute I stop bringing value to your organization, cut me, send me away. You know what? Put that money in your pocket. It's more valuable in your pocket than it is just to pay me because, you know, and the truth of the matter is, I know that I do really good work and I help a bunch of companies and I
right,
can always find more companies to help. So it's not about my paycheck. It's
right.
about, am I making a difference? Am I helping the companies?
Yeah.
So,
I really liked the way you phrased it earlier when you said, you get to a million, $2 million on heroics.
yeah.
And where the number of companies I talk to where they get to, again, million, $2 million mark, then something breaks. Normally, what happens, something breaks, their profitability goes through the floor, and then they're talking to someone like me because they've only lived with a bank account, you know?
Yeah.
Uh,
I always like to say heroic actions have heroic failures. So,
oh no.
and that's the point that we try to avoid. And so at some point you bring in systems and processes and frameworks that create a foundation. And that foundation is what allows you to continue to grow beyond the heroics. And that's something that I figured out back in 2010. I was
Mm.
working for a company. It was a company that a CEO that I had worked with at another company brought me in, and we were at a client meeting, and he introduced me. He said, "This is Brian. He does marketing magic." And I, you know, thank you. That was very kind, very flattering, but it really stuck in my craw. And I'm like, no, it's not magic. And so I stopped and I thought about it, and I thought, how do I do what I do? Because by this time, I was probably 5 or 6 companies into my career. All of them had been these turnarounds or rapid growth situations. And so there was a way that I was doing it. And so I decided to start documenting it. And that's when I came up with the whole market message map framework for being able to grow your business. I documented it, I tried it out, I tested it on SMBs, everybody from doctors to financial planners, right? I mean, you don't get, it's hard to find people that have less differentiation than financial planners most of the time, right? And so, how do you actually do that to build their brand, build their business,
Right,
grow their revenues, and help them out? And so, I created this whole system in this process, and that's really what I used to be able to develop. And once I was comfortable that I could do this for virtually any small business
right.
between $2 and $20 million, that's when I opened up the Value CMO.
Oh, that's wonderful. I have one question about your process. As I reflect about my own,
Mhm.
is one thing, maybe say that the most elegant way to say it is one part of the questions we always ask is what we'd call executive pay. And in other words, one thing that we find ourselves really concerned about are the motivations of of the business owner themselves, and how do we map the business and the finances to meet those goals? Because everyone's different. Sometimes they want a lifestyle business. They're going to sit on this thing for the next 10 years and then retire or pass it off to a child. Or it's to fund, educations, retirement, or they're going to grow this thing for 5 years and they're going to sell this belly. Um,
Yeah.
just and sometimes it's hard to forget. It's like, yeah, sure, it's like you might be talking to someone with a $10 million business, and they're normal people. They have goals, they have dreams, they have perfectly human motivations and instincts. And that's something that we really try to wrap into the financial side as we're setting goals and proposing strategy. Is that something, and that's, I don't know if that's how much of that is a deliberate choice on our part. And so I'm wondering, do you do a similar thing as you're working with these clients? Is that a consideration you're making?
Absolutely. It's an important consideration. I have one client who is a third generation family owner.
Mm,
And so his grandfather started the business, his dad ran the business, he's been running the business. And we talked about, and now his son-in-law is involved in the business. And so we
right,
talked about the future and the ability to expand geographies and grow to a national organization, and all those kinds of things. And he looked at me and he said, "That's not really what we want to do."
right,
I'm like, "Okay, okay, that's great." So what that does then that informs the strategy that says we're not going to expand geographically. We are going to focus to be the go-to company within the geography that we currently serve. And that's,
right,
so those come out in those strategic conversations. And
right.
that's why I always love when I start with a company or I'm interviewing them. And yes, I interview companies as well as they're interviewing me. I always look at that as a two-sided coin to see if that fit is there.
Absolutely.
And when I do, that's part of the thing, is to try and figure out, what are you looking for? What's your ultimate answer? What are you ultimately looking to do?
Mm,
Do you want to grow? Do you want to sell? Do you want to, I mean, what's at the end of the day,
yeah.
what's the perfect outcome for you? And that's
Yeah.
and so that tends to be a part of that whole strategy side. And if they say, I always ask, I say, do you have a strategy? And they go, of course I do. Can you share it with me? Well, no, it's up here. I'm like, oh, so unless it's written down, it's probably not a great strategy because you can't really share it very well with other people. And that's the other
Right.
side about a strategy is you need to be very transparent about your strategy. Because if you can share it with everybody, then everybody's on the same page. They know why they're doing what they're doing and the goal that they're trying to reach. And so,
Yeah.
um, it's the old marketing thing. What's your vision? What's your mission? All those
Oh,
kinds of
sure.
that
Yeah.
just seem like, eh, honestly, they seem like bullshit until you get into it and you understand what the real purpose for those are. And they
Right.
are to help other people truly see and understand in a perfect world, what would you like? What's the mark that you would like to leave on my
Right.
world? Right?
You know, it
That's
it
it.
reminds me,
Go ahead. I'm
sorry,
sorry.
it reminds me there's this one company where their goal was to employ 20 people from their hometown. Like that was it. Like, and that was the motivation. They start out as, I think it was like a small like bottling company or something like that. Their goal was to
Yeah.
grow big enough to employ 20 people from their hometown. Some small Midwestern place. And they're like, no, no, no. We're going to be the employer. We're going to keep these people here. We're going to be part of this community.
How
Which are,
admirable is that?
I mean, it's something that I mean, going from the government world to SMBs, small and mid cap, like just the pure entrepreneurial spark and excitement, the joie de vivre, if you will. And just so many companies, so many business owners out there are so noble in their goals and their intentions that,
Sure
which
they
is
are.
something I truly didn't expect. I don't ever really sit down thinking, and maybe I should, I didn't ever sit down thinking that their goal is going to be to employ 20 people from their hometown.
Yeah.
We're going to hit that goal and say, well, maybe it's 35 now.
Yeah.
Just just incredible stories.
Well, and the whole thing that the whole reason I do this is to be able to make a difference for other people. And if you look
Right.
at that, everybody that I work with, the owners, they're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to make a
Right.
difference for the people they employ.
Right.
And that's such an admirable thing, right? I never have to look at my clients and go, you're just a money grubbing SOB, right? It doesn't play that way because most small business owners aren't like that. And if I run
Right.
across one, they're not my client.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, it's similarly, I don't often come across money grubbing. I do in
yeah,
maybe the gosh, this might sound awful, but larger organizations where you can kind of hide in a corporate structure. And maybe that's the wrong characterization of it, hiding.
no, I
But
mean, I've been a part of enough of those to know that, and especially public companies, if
oh,
public
yeah,
companies manage to the quarter, and
yes.
they will cut to the bone and cut
Yeah,
through the bone to be able to make their
oh,
quarterly numbers. And it's such
right.
a short-sighted approach, but
Right.
it's what the market demands. I don't blame people, but that's one of the reasons why I don't work with public companies, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I gravitated towards small and mid-sized businesses. And really they're mostly small businesses. 2 to 20 million
Right.
is still a small business. You
Okay.
may even employ 50 to 100 people at that stage,
Sure.
closer to a $20 million business, but you're still a small business and you are making a big difference in people's lives. I've yet
Right.
to meet a business owner in that $2 to $20 million range that doesn't feel personal responsibility
Yep.
to families of their employees.
As someone with employees, that is such a true statement. Where it's, gosh, I remember, the conversations where it's like, hey, something happened. We don't know if we can hit rent this month. Is there something? Can we talk about this?
Right.
It's like you as the owner, like, yeah, we're going to talk about it.
Of
Well,
course.
of course we're going to talk about this. You
Yeah.
know, um, gosh, it reminds me. So I'm out in Utah, south of Salt Lake,
Uh-huh.
and there's one construction company in the area where their goal, one of their kind of internal mission statements, is they don't do layoffs in winter.
Hmm.
which for construction, winter,
That's not
nothing
easy.
happened.
That's
It is
that's a that's a tough one. Yeah.
it is, and it's like, but really, they are masters of cash flow. They've dialed in everything because keeping good people with them through the off season is that important, and those employees really value it. Like
Yeah.
it is an equal exchange, and it's one of those things where it's like it, sometimes it's like, especially maybe I should say, especially if you're not already quite large, being able to budget your cash flow that effectively is a huge lift. It is a major accomplishment in
It's a
construction.
commitment. It's a
Absolutely.
big time commitment.
And I just feel so grateful when I get to see or work with these kind of companies.
Yeah.
Because they always have such no like, and this is the hardest part. It's like most business owners I've ever encountered have noble intentions and goals at the beginning. And where the CXO world comes in is where the commitment doesn't have the expertise to match it quite yet. Uh,
Well stated. Very well stated. Yeah.
and that's one thing that I really really enjoy. And it sounds like it's the stuff that you're really doing over there at the Value CMO is we can be a little bit passionate about it. We don't care about what the goal is. Profit doesn't have to be the bottom line per se. We
Right.
can say, we're going to prioritize our employees. We're going to prioritize long-term strategies, which is something you don't get in the public sphere. That just makes the big difference. Goodness, I've rambled on quite a bit, haven't I?
I have so enjoyed this conversation. This
Well,
has been great.
well, before we log off, is there any closing message or any sort of wrap up that you'd like to leave us with about yourself, about the Value CMO? This has been so delightful.
Um, so fractional CMO work is a really wise investment, especially for those companies between $2 and $20 million, whether it's me or whether it's anyone. And interview them the way you would interview for a full-time CMO role. Make sure that you understand their value and what they bring to the table, and what else they can do for your company. And I think that that's really a critical part of everything. There is one other thing that I'd like to throw in real quick here
Of course.
is because I enjoy so much the coaching and mentoring of marketing people, and helping them grow their careers. I'm actually working on, and I should be releasing pretty soon, online courses for helping
Oh,
specifically marketing managers or marketing directors elevate their careers and become part of that executive team. Because what happens is if you're a marketing person inside a company, you get stuck, right? Oh, she's really good at doing events, or he's really good at
lads.
at doing ads, Google ads,
Right.
right? And so they look at you as that person. But the reality is to move to the executive table, you need to be able to move from being tactical to being strategic. And that's the part that nobody teaches, right?
Right.
That's experience only that gets you there. And so I actually have taken my frameworks of the market, the message, and the map, and I've added two more in. One is called
Mm.
manage, because nobody teaches you how to manage teams and people and projects and all that stuff. And then the last one is magnify, because to be able to get to that executive table or that C-suite, you have to understand how to magnify your influence with the people who can help you get there. And so it's a 5-part overall program that I'm working on developing, and it's going to be online classes because that way I can influence and help a whole lot more people than I can help one-on-one, right? I get to
Right.
do I get to help maybe a dozen people or 2 dozen people in a year. This way I can help hundreds of people a year, maybe
Right.
even thousands, right? And that would be awesome.
That's
That would
incredible.
be a legacy that I'd love to be able to leave. So
Well, all the best luck to you. I hope that works out. I'll be excited to watch. I'll be excited for the release.
yeah, that should be coming up soon. So I'll post it on the Value CMO website, and we'll have a sign up and lists and all that kind of stuff. And just like the Value CMO, we will make it something that is um, value focused for our core audience. So
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Brian, CEO of the Value CMO, for joining us. This has been so delightful.
it's been my pleasure, Brian. Thank you so much.